Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I'm so thrilled to see such a packed house. And thanks for coming out to learn more about this neighborhood's amazing culinary roots and evolving food culture. My name is Emma. I am the program director of the Museum of Food and Drink. And for those of you who are new to our organization, the Museum of Food and Drink, or MOFAD, is a nonprofit focused on raising public awareness and understanding of the history, cultural significance, and science of food and drink. Last October, we actually opened our first space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, called MOFAD Lab. We also opened our first exhibition there, which is called Flavor, Making It and Faking It. And it is a multi-sensory look at the last century or so of the synthetic flavor industry. So if you haven't had a chance yet to come see that exhibition, we'd love it if you would make the trip out to Brooklyn. Tonight's discussion is actually part of a larger series called MOFAD City, which will take place in different neighborhoods around New York City. We've already done 2 of these events, one in Crown Heights and one in our neighborhood in Williamsburg. We're doing 3 more in June. There's more information about those upcoming events on a flyer on that table over there. Each of these MOFAD City programs brings together local food business owners and neighborhood experts for conversations exploring the diverse food cultures of our city, with an emphasis on the contributions of immigrant entrepreneurs to New York City's food culture and economy. We'd like to thank, especially this evening, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council member Margaret Chen, the Robert and Tony Bader Charitable Foundation for their support of this MOFAD City series. Additionally, a very big thanks to the New York Public Library for hosting us here and helping us organize this event. And finally, we're, in addition to these events, producing a series of small print guides, which you may have received already. If you haven't, feel free to take one of the yellow guides up front. That's a little guide to Chinatown's food businesses that we put together. We also are producing some other print guides for these other programs that we're doing, which you can pick up at the museum in Williamsburg. And we'd also, because we're doing these guides, like to give a shout out to the many people who do food tours around New York City. There are a ton of great food walking tours. In particular, one of our most dedicated MOFAD volunteers, Adrienne Cooper, runs Fun Foodie NYC, and you can find more about her business over at that table as well. She has business cards and a flyer there. So very quickly, just a little plug for the museum before we get started. If you enjoyed tonight's program and also you care about MOFAD's mission of raising public awareness and understanding of food and really inspiring sort of system-wide change in our food system through really engaging and educational programming, we encourage you to either become a member or make a donation on our website, attend other MOFAD City events that are happening next month. Again, we have 3 of those coming up. And also visit our space in Brooklyn and see our flavor exhibition. You can find more information about becoming a member, donating, and about that exhibition on our website, mofad.org. All right, quickly, I will introduce the panelists. You have their bios in the program, so I won't read through all of those. But our moderator this evening is Francis Lam, who's a food writer. He's also the editor at large at Clarkson Potter and a columnist at the New York Times Magazine. Next, we have Wellington Chen, who is the executive director of the Chinatown Partnership. Also, Wilson Tang, the owner of Namwa Tea Parlor and Fun Tu. Sophia Ng, who's the owner of Po Wing Hong Food Market and Po Wing Trading Corporation. And also Kian Lam Kho, who's the co-curator of the Museum of Chinese America's upcoming exhibition, which is opening in fall 2016, called Sweet, Sour, Bitter, Spicy, Stories of Chinese Food and Identity. He's also the author of Phoenix Claws and Jade Trees, Essential Techniques of Chinese Cooking. So, without further ado, please give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thank you all for being here today. I was really excited to be asked to be on this, or to help moderate this discussion, because well, like all of you who are here because you're interested in Chinatown, I'm fascinated by Chinatown. And Chinatown obviously is a very historic neighborhood, but it's also an incredibly dynamic neighborhood. And I think that's something that's maybe lost on, or maybe isn't obvious to people who either don't know the neighborhood or haven't spent a lot of time here, and only sort of see it as being, you know, generically foreign. It's just weird, and so it's weird today, and it's always been weird, and it's probably weird in the same way, and it's not. It's not. It's, maybe it is weird, but it's changed in its weirdness over time, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about, and specifically how that change is manifested in the food that is eaten and served and cooked here. But one way that I think about how Chinatown has changed so here's a quick story. I was a kid, I was in a shopping mall in New Jersey where I grew up. We were in a Macy's, and my parents pulled a dress off the rack and said, "We made that." And my parents worked in a garment factory in Chinatown. And I tell that story now, and it seems almost absurd that in my lifetime there was manufacturing, actual industrial manufacturing that happened in Chinatown when you consider what rent is in this neighborhood now, and the kinds of businesses that actually start here now and can afford to be here. But yeah, that was the case, and they eventually that industry started to sort of curtail in the mid to late 90s, and then September 11th essentially did it all away, because the neighborhood was, I don't know if anyone was here or remembers September 11th in Chinatown in particular, but basically the neighborhood was cordoned off for 3 months, and when you're talking about industries that are already squeezed economically, to have essentially 3 months where you couldn't get in and out of it pretty much means your businesses are going to go away. So September 11th was an incredibly potent turning point in the history of Chinatown, and one of the sort of moments of extraordinary change. But of course, it's not always purely economics. There have always been different immigrants from different regions of China, from different areas of the world, and there are always tourists in Chinatown, pretty much from the beginning. No, we laugh, but this is actually really an important part of the neighborhood, because when you think of the history of food served in Chinatown, a big part of that history is food made by Chinese people for Chinese people, but an almost equally important part of that was it was food made by Chinese people for people who wanted to come and see this sort of exotic cuisine. And so culinary tourism into this neighborhood has always been a part of the neighborhood pretty much from the moment of its existence. And so again, today we're going to talk a little bit about that past, but I think we're I feel extremely honored to be here with this panel, because we have such a wide range of perspectives, and also young business owners in Chinatown who are a new generation of entrepreneur, and taking us into the future. So what some ground rules. We were going to do a brief introduction from each person, but I think, unless you guys want to do that, if you guys want to talk about yourselves for 60 to 90 seconds, or we can just launch right into questions that I have for you. Votes. This is still a democracy until President Trump takes over.
I'll talk about myself first. My name is Wilson. I run a very old restaurant in Chinatown, family business, for 6 years already. And in the past 6 years, I've also opened another branch of the Nam Hua in Philadelphia, and also have a Chinese American restaurant called Feng Tu on the Lower East Side. So that's about it for me.
I've just mentioned the origin of Chinatown Partnership. For those of you who do not know, as Francis mentioned, we are a creature of 9/11. We grew out of the ashes of 9/11, and about 5 years after post 9/11, Chinatown Partnership came into being to try to mitigate the impact not only for Chinatown but for the Lower East Side and the garment district, and the restaurant is a vital role besides the garment industry. The industry produces a lot of jobs and training.
Hi, my name is Sophia in Tsao. I just got married. So it's weird. No, thank you. No, you don't know why. It's a curse. No. So my family and I run Hong Food Market. We've been in the community for almost 40 years. We're one of the older supermarkets in Chinatown. And I'll elaborate more a little bit later, but we also do restaurant supplies, so we have another division that supplies to almost 80% of Chinatown, just foods. So, yeah, thank you. I just saw your order, thank you. So they just, they actually make their own, like, changfen, because like you bought flour from me.
Thousands of dollars.
Okay, well, I'll send you some mooncake for Chinese New Year. But I'm really happy to be here, and hopefully I can give you a different perspective of some things that you probably are not familiar with, which is traditional Chinese food.
My name is Kian, and I didn't grow up in Chinatown, and I'm basically the first generation immigrant. I came here to go to university and to school, and also food actually is not my first career. I used to be a software developer for Wall Street for 25 years, and was only involved with food about 7-8 years ago. But yeah, I think I'm looking at Chinatown from the perspective of being a consumer and also being an immigrant, adapting to the foodways here in America, and how I actually was able to, adapt to the local ingredients. And I hope that will bring in some of the perspective from someone who just immigrated from somewhere else.
Thank you, and congratulations, Sophia. I have to say, when I got married, I bought the chopsticks for a wedding at your store. So, so here are the rules, okay? It's not really a game, there's not really a competition, so the rules don't really matter, but I'm just going to let you know. I'm going to address a specific question to each of you, or one or two of you, but after you respond, if anyone else has anything they'd like to add or something, please feel free. And then sooner or later, it's just going to devolve into a total free-for-all. And then at 7:45, I think, we're going to turn questions to the audience. Is that? Yeah. Okay, so set your clocks. Let me know if I'm going over. And Wellington, let's start with you, because you work in community development, you work with local community organizations, and you work with the Business Improvement District, and you work with business owners and residents. So you have a sort of very wide perspective on certainly the economic situation of Chinatown. And let me ask you this, just so we have a bit of context. I mentioned before, the garment industry used to be big here, and that's no longer, right? So how big a part of the local economy, how important a part of the local economy is food, past and present?
I would say that.
Can you hear me?
I would say that the restaurant and the food industry is so critical, not just for Chinatown, but for the entire
Planet, because we exist not just for survival but enjoying. And there's a great book here, I'm going to give it a plug, The Psychology of Eating and Drinking, that written by Alexander Poe. It's really about why we're behaving the way we do, and why we, the book talks about the Chinatown chicken that used to play tic-tac-toe against you. There's also, the chicken always wins, by the way. And there's a secret to it. There's a saying about that anywhere in America, if there's a town with a population of 50,000, there's bound to be a Chinese restaurant. And so you can see the restaurant, the reason I keep on mentioning restaurant is such vital to us, greater than the garment industry, is because it paid for my tuition. When I came here, I was a busboy, I was a waiter, I was a kitchen helper, I was a dishwasher, I was a maitre d', I was a bartender, and then I helped somebody open a new restaurant in Midtown, and went up from there. So more than just providing for the job, what the industry does is it provides extremely good discipline for a young man coming up like me, which is that it really gives you focus. Back then you had to give the duck sauce, the fried noodles for free, and then there's the soup, there's the appetizer, there's the main course, and then there's a dessert, and then you had to tend the bar, and the entire restaurant has only 2 waiters with 34 tables. So it bounds to train you to a very, and also it's not just about the food. What you fundamentally coming in is also for an experience. And that experience taught me, that it's about social interaction. It's about dealing with human beings. So I cannot emphasize enough how much this is still a backbone for the whole Chinese community throughout this nation.
Do you have a sense of how many restaurants there are in Chinatown?
Well, we do know, and this is the misnomer, and this is where the part B of your question is harder to answer. I have a handout here, which is that Chinatown has several thousand businesses, and most of you come in for food or the handbags or the watches. That's what the tour guide told me. And so, but out of the 4,000 businesses, only 300 are eateries. So our job right now is to really dig deep into the hidden silos, the many other industries that are here. Do you know that we have many good top doctors here? And you went up to Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue to pay exorbitant prices that you could get here for the same thing. And also the food, the cholesterol-lowering food that is in the supermarket that is a fraction of what Lipitor will charge you is here. So you can see, and also the obesity factor, I got recruited to serve on the public health. We now, because of the epidemic of availability of plentiful food, in the old days you had to forage for dinner tonight. You don't even know where your dinner is coming from tonight. And so that biomechanism of building up your body mechanism to say, I need to store fat, I need to store up just in case to hibernate for the winter. That mechanism is still in our DNA, so we need to overcome that. That's why diet is so hard. Trying to lose weight is so hard, and so I find it fascinating. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
there's probably some like acupuncture for weight loss, right? It's actually really a full-service neighborhood.
So the insight is why we behave the way we do, why we eat, and there are modifications to your behavior that can force you to eat less or force you to eat more. So just read the book, and I think you find it fascinating.
Thank you, Wilson. So this is a joint question for Sophia and Wilson. Sophia, you mentioned your store was founded, I think, around 1980, so almost 36, 37 years ago. Wilson, Nam Hoa, Fung Tu is new, but Nam Hoa is since 1920 and been in your family since the 60s?
Yeah, 70s actually.
70s.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, obviously you have not been working in the store, Sophia, since before you were born. I know that's part of the Chinese work ethic. I'm frankly disappointed in you that you weren't working in the store. And Wilson, same in the restaurant. You should have come in a previous life and worked in the restaurant. But I assume that you were at least aware of your family's businesses as you were growing up. If you didn't, and I don't know if you worked in them when you were young or whatever, but can you speak to how your businesses, as you understand them in your family, have changed or evolved over time in relation to the neighborhood around it, to the community around it?
Okay, well, I did used to work at the store. I used to bag groceries, but as you know, actually Francis and I grew up in the same town in New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey, but on the weekends, I went to Chinese school. And after Chinese school, I would go to the store and bag groceries. I would, put things away, just be, try to be helpful. Back in the day, and we were very fortunate because my grandparents, on my mom's side, they were merchants in Hong Kong and sent my uncle over here, my mom's brother, over here to start a branch. And that's basically how our business got started. My parents actually met here and married here, but back in the day, in the 90s, Chinatown really wasn't that safe. That's why we moved out to New Jersey. There were rival gangs trying to collect, protection money. My dad got robbed a bunch of times, but he got really close to our garbage collectors, which were the Italians. So he's like, one time this gang member came and he's like, demanding money. He's like, blah, blah, blah. And my dad's like, yeah, you can collect money from me, but I'm already protected by Tony. So, so he's like, if you want money, go talk to Tony. And then he never came back. And it's funny because they're still our garbage collectors, and that's their sons. But anyway. But yeah, I mean, that we're really close to Italians because we have the same, family background. We love family, and Italians love family, and so we've commingled with them for so long. But back in the day, there were it was easy for us because there were lots of Chinese people in Chinatown. I mean, it was flourishing. We went, it's all the way down to East Broadway, and we took over that whole area, downtown area, and the business was good. It was really good. It wasn't until the rents started going up that other Chinatowns developed, and we did lose some business. There were other supermarkets that opened up in Flushing and then in Brooklyn as well. But the difference between us and them is that we don't sell produce. We're very traditional, and we're Cantonese, so we're very keen on what we eat. We eat really healthy foods, and we eat based on the different seasons, and so it's a little bit different because we built up a reputation of quality. And as you know, it's basic economics, right? If you good quality, good price, and you have business, and that's basically how it is. Why we've sustained for so long. But it has affected our business, and with this down economy these past few years, we've definitely seen a drop in our wholesale business and restaurant supply. A lot of restaurants have closed, and but fortunately, new immigrants that come in that have that backup from China, they bring business in Chinatown, and they have money. So I mean, it's cyclical. I mean, it hasn't been effect, yes, for the locals, but with this new influx of immigrants, we've seen some bounce back.
I think my story kind of echoes Sophia's. Growing up, it was we had Namwa had a very big mooncake business, and we did that for a long time. That wholesale was actually our bread and butter, and the dim sum and the pastries were secondary. So growing up, it was the gang stuff actually happened on our block, on Doyer Street. It's a crooked little street where rival gangs just meet and kill each other and run away. And so I wasn't in the store a lot because my parents didn't want me to be a part of that. So we actually moved to Bushwick. which wasn't great back then, but it's really cool now. So again, same story. Weekends, Chinese school at CCBA, right? Yeah. Chinese school at CCBA. After Chinese school is Chinatown Fair and over to my uncle's store.
Where the chicken played tic-tac-toe with you.
Yeah, I remember that. And we did a lot of mooncake business, and I remember just being in there and putting the boxes together and hanging out. And until I want to say the 90s when this trade with China opened up. You're involved in this because we saw our mooncake business drop because the new Hong Kong Bingpei. I don't know how do you say Bingpei, but
Frozen mooncake.
the frozen mooncake business kind of took off. The snow skin stuff. And Sophia's family was importing that stuff.
So you got to know her garbage collector.
Unfortunately, I didn't know the Tony back then, so our mooncake business started to decline when this trade with Hong Kong ramped up, and our mooncakes went all up the eastern seaboard, but in the 2000s it really slowed down, and then the good thing was that my uncle owned the building, so it was kind of his hangout. If we didn't do any business, it's fine. But we were always open, and we'll serve something, and those were the only way. That was the only way we survived because we actually owned the property.
Well, let me ask both of you, because both of you have mentioned sort of the difficult times for your businesses. Both of you have somewhat recently taken over those businesses. And it's funny when you hear you talk about the issue of security and safety too, because so I mentioned before, my parents worked in Chinatown when I was growing up, and after I graduated from college and kicked around for a couple of years, and I ended up taking a job in Chinatown at a local community development organization, and my parents were like, oh, you got a job? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, where are you working? I'm like, well, I'm working in Chinatown, and like I could hear their voice, like just totally be like, well, why? And there was like legitimate disappointment, and they were really upset, and they started crying, and they said, no, seriously, we worked there 20 years, so you never would have to. Like, why would you go back there? And then I told them where the office was, and it was a Division in Allen, and my mother like started crying more, and she's because that was like really the sketchy part, right? And she's like, well, if you hear gunshots, don't try to be a hero. I swear to God she said that to me. So, and they had left Chinatown like some years before in the mid-90s when and that was their impression of it. This was this was 6 years after that. It was no, sorry, it was like, it was 1999, and I had going to work there every day. I had no sense that it was not a safe place, but that's the narrative of Chinatown as being a dangerous place had sort of taken over her mentality, and I think for a lot of people of that generation, that was the feeling. So, as you said, both your families moved away. But I think it's really notable that the two of you now have taken over these family businesses and are running them in the neighborhood, but that seems to be something of an unusual phenomenon, right? Do you see the friends you grew up with, do you see your competitors or other peers in your industries, do you see that? Do you see a new generation taking over that family business?
Well, like for myself, this is 6 years now. I think 6 years ago it was like, oh wow, I was working at, where was I working? I was working at ING Direct, which was a bank, and like you're gonna not do that and go work at a restaurant. And I still remember that conversation with my dad. He's like, oh, that's weird, you're educated, but you want to go work in the restaurant business. I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be cool. I'm like forward facing. It's gonna be great. I love food. I love food business, and it was a thing with my dad. It's like, oh, we really had like a long talk about it. But I think moving forward, like now, it's not so bad anymore. It's like I think it's the food business is well accepted now.
I think I have a little bit different story. So when I was young and I was growing up in New Jersey, I was one of like 5 Asians. It was like a Japanese, me and a Taiwanese girl and some Indian girl or something, or boy, and that's it. So I remember in 2nd grade, it was like my birthday, and everybody brought like, supposed to bring in snacks. I guess nowadays that doesn't even happen because like of the allergies or whatever, but we had like cupcakes and everything, right? But my family, we're, they're really busy, always constantly working 7 days a week, 364 days a year besides Chinese New Year, and they didn't make anything. I had a nanny and I had my grandma who lived with me, so I'm in that sense really traditional. But one time I remember I brought shrimp chips. Yeah, I don't know if you know what these are, but I brought that to my class, and they were really small bags, and everybody got one. And we're sitting in that U shape, and they're all like, "What is this?" Like, "What is this?" And I was really embarrassed because my parents thought it was really great because it's a really popular Asian snack, and all your classmates are really gonna love it. But I was really embarrassed because like people are like, "What is shrimp?" And like, I don't know. You guys don't eat shrimp. I don't know. But it was, so I think I got really turned off, being in my family business for a while, and I didn't appreciate it. I speak Chinese because I lived at home with my grandma, but I didn't really see my parents growing up. I didn't even know we like kind of had money because like we lived it very modestly, and it wasn't until later on like that, I was filling out college apps, and I was like, oh, we make a decent living, how come, but I think that's like the frugal mentality of Chinese people, like save. And, but that's when I kind of first caught a glimpse. I was like, okay, well, this business makes money, why am I not proud of it or something? So, throughout the years, I went to college, I came back, and I went to different cities to work. I went to, Kian and I are alumni of Boston University, but it was funny. So, I have an education. I moved out to Portland for a while doing all different jobs, decent jobs, but always in the back of my mind is, I want to help my parents retire. And everybody, my whole family was like, you guys have such a great reputation in Chinatown. Every time I would come back, I was like, why don't you guys take over? Why don't you take over? It's different, because I was encouraged to take over the family business, but I didn't want to,
So who was saying that to you? Like, where were you hearing that from?
Well, the whole community was like, oh, we love, in Wellington, it was like, oh, I'm Thai, like, oh, so, like, they're great, because my parents are great, they are really great people. They're really great people. They're friendly. We have a really, authentic business. We never sell, like, imitation stuff, and that's why a lot of restaurants buy from us, because you ask me what you want, and I can, most of the time, get it for you. We don't import everything, and sometimes it's a quality issue, but it's encouraging because we have a really good reputation in Chinatown. And there's really not many people like me or Wilson that come back to the community, because, like you said, it's it's looked down upon. It's really looked down upon. But and I've been asked to speak about this, and I normally don't. This is probably my first panel ever, and I don't really like to talk about it because I like to just live it, and I work every day. I don't work like this every day, dressed up, today, it's working in Chinatown is hard. It's hard because I'm an ABC, all right? I can speak Chinese, but I'm not from Hong Kong or China. When you work with people who have immigrated there, they grew up during the Cultural Revolution. They are in their zone of let's not stir any problems, and it's crazy because during that time there was no real education because everybody was fighting their teachers and professors, right? So I work with people who grew up in that generation of no real formal education. So when I try to implement like my management style that I learned in management school, they're like, oh, F you, like, you don't know what it's like, So that it discourages a lot of people from coming in. I'm sure Wilson has faced the same thing.
It's the same. We have the same problems, but it's up to us though, like honestly, to push forward and make those changes. So like I want to mention like even like now today, like we have all these new businesses in Chinatown run by ABCs like ourselves. There's the ice cream store.
The Chinatown ice cream back?
No, her too. But like the 10 Below place on Last Street. Like these are kids that came back to the neighborhood, like younger than us.
What ABC?
American Born Chinese. What's that? The egg waffle. That. So there's like a bunch of these restaurants that I'm like so proud because look, like they're coming back too. Just like I paved this road for these guys to come back and they're coming back. So it's like a proud moment for me.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about how coming back to these businesses, and I think in a lot of situations, immigrant or not, or culturally Chinese or not, there's always going to be a culture clash between generations anyway, right? If you have businesses that were family businesses and that were started and run and hopefully run successfully for many years, essentially based on instinct, and then their children go and get formal education or formal training in business management, and they come back and try to institute those ideas. It's always important to realize that we want to talk about cuisine and food as being cultural, but businesses and communication styles and management styles are also cultural. And so there's always going to be some friction there when people come back. But to turn the conversation more to the idea of, more to the food, I want to go to Kian, because as you said, you didn't grow up in Chinatown, you don't know this community from the inside in that way, but you are curating a show for the Museum of Chinese Americas that is an oral history with different Chinese cooks, largely from this neighborhood. Can you talk about that show? Can you talk about what it is? Tell us what it is, but also talk to us about what were the things you kept hearing those cooks saying when you asked them to talk about cooking their food?
Right. First of all, the show is at MOFAD, Museum of Chinese in America, and that's opening in October. And basically, what it is, it's an oral history show. We interviewed a lot of different chefs and home cooks. We're trying to find representation of different parts of the society and how people actually adapt to being an immigrant here in America. So we interviewed a few home cooks. Actually, one of the grand aunt of a friend of a friend, whatever, lives in Chinatown, and we actually went to visit her and talk to her about how, when she moved to America, and how she actually adjusted to her cooking. And and also we talked to chefs who, for example, Ming Sai, and how he actually used Chinese ingredients and so on, and adapt to his style of cooking, which is mostly Western cooking. And so it's a very interesting perspective from different people. One of the things that I have to say also, me being an immigrant myself, when I first moved to America, I went to school in Boston. By the way, even though we went to BU, but it's generations apart. When I first went to Boston, the Chinese restaurants that you go to is Polynesian Chinese, and so it's not really Chinese food per se. And so for me, it was the search for what I'm familiar with, for what I experienced at home, that sort of led me to many of the Chinatowns. In fact, we used to drive down to New York and actually go to New York Chinatown and buy stuff here to bring back to Boston to cook. And I remember that at that time, New York, the Chinatown here is where everybody, all the Chinese people from all over come to actually shop, because in Boston you get very, very limited selections. But I mean, it's different now. When I was first moved to Boston, that's what it was like. So I remember that period where it was bustling, and the two things that we always that I used to come to New York Chinatown for: food, and also to go to a travel agency. I don't know why, because that's where we buy cheap tickets to go back to Asia. I don't know what happened to all those travel agencies. I guess they disappeared because of internet. But yeah, to get back to your question, is that people do a lot of adapting to ingredients and such. Like when we talk to this lady Nimama, she mentioned when she first arrived, which is about, I think she's been here like 15 years. When she first arrived, she struggled to try to reproduce a lot of the dishes. But then, over the last 10 years or so, there's a lot of new ingredients are being imported. I think that's the same experience that you have, Sophia, is that you started, you guys started importing a lot of the products from Hong Kong, and in fact, Nimama, she's from Fujian province, which is also where I came from. My family is from Fujian province, and that the Fujian people actually immigrated to New York and populated East Broadway area here, because you can actually find a lot of Fujian restaurants up and down here. And she talks about a lot of those Fujian ingredients, which I am familiar and I also craved for before. And now a lot of it is available, which is and so you can see the development of what the product is available here in Chinatown, here in New York. In fact, I'm kind of interested to find out, do you have to adjust to like the Fujian immigrant with their products or not?
Well, that's one of those things that it's really hard for us because, in East Broadway, this area, there's a lot of Fujian grocery stores, and people generally stick with their own people. Cantonese people come to us. Fujian people go to,
Well, that's interesting because I to be honest with you, now I can find a lot of ingredients and products that I grew up with, the Fujian ingredients. One of the very specific item which I love is I don't know if any of you are familiar with rice wine leaves. These are the residue of the rice that after you make wine. So it's the residue of that wine, and we actually use that for flavoring. There are two kinds of rice wine leaves. There's white colored one, and then there's the red colored one. The red wine leaves is very specific to the Fujian region, including the Hakka people and so on. We eat that, and I grew up on that. And I have to say that it was amazing to actually see that like 5-6 years ago being sold in the supermarket and here in Chinatown, and that was never available before. So I think it's amazing to see the changes of what is available now compared to like in the 70s and 80s.
You bring up two really interesting things, right? One is the changing demographics of the neighborhood. There's still, I don't know if the total number of Chinese people, is not greater or less than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, but certainly there are more people from Fujian than there were when I was growing up here. Like when I went out, I never grew up here, but like when I grew up coming here with my parents, I never heard anything in the Cantonese on the street. And maybe because we never came out here, because my mom was terrified for our lives if we were coming out. But certainly that population has grown, and many of the new immigrants are from that region, and very, very few new immigrants are from Hong Kong or Cantonese-speaking parts of China, and often those people won't even come to China anyway. They go directly to the suburbs, or they go maybe into Flushing or into Sunset Park. But there's that piece of, there's that driver of change in the neighborhood, right? There is, in fact, a different pattern of immigration in the neighborhood. But I want to go back to what you said about when you were in Boston and you could only eat Chinese food and when you said Polynesian restaurants, which like the tiki restaurants from the 60s, and I think there's like a big famous one like on Highway 1 or whatever.
Kowloon.
What was it called?
Kowloon.
Kowloon, yeah. And that idea of Chinese food, that sort of from like the post-World War II, right, in the 50s and 60s, certainly, as Chinese food was sort of this exotic, strange thing that was sold on its exoticism, but was primarily cooked with ingredients that were available here, and often by cooks who were not actually trained cooks, who just kind of like, I don't know, I've got yellow skin, I guess I qualify. So it sort of developed its own cuisine that you can still see vestiges of here in Chinatown. Very kind of few and far between, but I remember not that long ago there was a restaurant called New South Wind, if anyone knows this place, on Division Street. And I remember going there and being blown away because there was literally not a person who worked there under the age of like probably 70. I'm not even kidding, like, I swear, like the woman who took the food out of the kitchen, I was like, no, mama, you sit down. I'll tell you what, I'll go to the kitchen, I'll eat it, and then I'll bring you something else. I could not bear to see this woman like working. But probably she's been working there for 40, 50 years. And if you remember, can you talk about that food and that sort of era of Chinese food here?
I just want to say I'm so glad that Francis mentioned about that particular restaurant because it's a classic example of the authenticity of a neighborhood, long traditional, well-liked, generous proportion restaurant that went away. And for every Wilson and every Sophia, I probably lost 4 or 5 other ones like that. So as you just mentioned, it's not cool to come back, right? So I think it's becoming very clear to me in my role as trying to resuscitate the former glory that's here, is that whether you're from, comparing the Italian-American history who put up a good fight, or the Irish, or the Germans, or the Jews, is that succession planning becomes quick. We really need to change this mindset that it's not cool to come back. So that's why I'm delighted to see not only Wilson, Sophia, but all the latecomers that are coming back and recognizing, hey, succession planning is critical because no one's guarding the back door, and we're the fifth donkey, like I like you to say, right? Because you think about how large a German population were here. 400 blocks of Klein Deutschland, and then the largest Jewish concentration, and then Little Italy put up a good fight, and they shared the tips with us, and they said, boy, cousins, your symptoms look like us 20 to 30 years ago. So this is the part. And I also want to take it to a different perspective, if I may. The Chinese value eating. Chinese, in order to feed 1.3 billion people, to have a meal tonight is very, very most important. Italians may crave for the fashion. For the Chinese, the word for greeting is, have you eaten? And when you were talking about Cultural Revolution, there were millions who were starved as recently as in the 60s, where CIA thought the Chinese army was on the move, where in fact these were corpses being transported by the millions out to be buried. And so this is where I want to get this message out so that you understand the potential perceived conflict between China and US is a false dichotomy. It really is. China always recognized that it needs to feed its own population. And so we never had it easy. It's not we're blessed with the cornfields, the Midwest, the prairies that you have here in this country. You're blessed. We're really blessed here. China's terrain is mountainous. We have to carve out. Why do you think we're eating, the roots in the bottom, watercress nuts, and things like that? The Chinese diet is very healthy because it was full of fiber. I remember my mom telling me that they don't get to eat meat until New Year. The food that you're eating, you don't need to eat potato. You're only eating potato skins because the potato is sold off. So that diet is extremely healthy. However, just keep in mind that, compared to India, also have 1.3 billion people, and it's a food democracy, and you're having trouble because you disagree about how to get the food there. It's not a lack of food. We're wasting 40% of the food that we produce and throw it away, right? And so this is where I want to share with you. China has never been a colonizer. We went to Somalia with our fleet before Columbus, 1403 to 1422. We just want to exchange gifts. So I think this tension, rising tension, to justify the military-industrial complex is a false path. And having the only build a wall that's visible from the moon, it didn't work. So I'm very concerned about this election, that this false premise again to be perpetuated. And so I think this is a little bit off the topic. I just wanted to share that.
Well, maybe it's not off topic because if we have President Trump, he's going to, we'll be thrown out of here. Maybe we'll get the taco bowls. Like that's what we'll use. Taco bowls. Okay, so it is now 7:50. Do we have any questions from the audience for our distinguished panelists?
I have a question. There's only one woman up there. What is it like being a woman working in Chinatown? Especially, it's very patriarchal. You see women all over the place working. Just before here, I had dumplings on Moscow Street, and it's all women in there working. But how high up are you?
Thank you for that question. I'm pretty high up, thanks. But the thing is, it was hard coming into the family business. In the sense that I was young, first of all. I was really young, like maybe 26, 27, when I first started just learning about the industry, right? But my mom, she is like a workhorse in Chinatown, and I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but everybody knows her you know, and it's been really, really hard to live up to her, to live up to her because she is amazing, right? But the thing that that keeps me going, you know, I know in any industry it's pretty male dominated, you know, especially the egos of the Chinese man. Okay? They think they know better, right? But about anything, it's true. And it's great. It's funny because my family's not like that. You know, my dad is really passive, and but he's like a really smart man. You know, so. It's been really great to follow their lead because they are real pioneers of a successful business. You know, like a husband and wife team. You know, but I think I've been these past 8 years. I've definitely been criticized for no apparent reason other than the fact that I'm a woman, I'm young, you know, and I have a voice. Right, because when you're young, you know, when I first came in, I was like, you know, in my mid-20s, right, and I was like, this is gonna be great, you know, I'm gonna help my family business, and you know, it's funny because when you have like this type of like mentality, it's strange in the Chinese culture where they will try to, they think less of you. They think less of you because you're happy and you're intelligent and you know whatever. And then the minute like people just start disrespecting me, like I was just like, hey, what's going on? I'm nice to you. Why you know, why all this? Why all this pushback? And then it changes you. It changed me. I became firmer in how I speak. I became a lot richer, you know, because that's how you demand respect. And people who have visited China, and I know you guys know, right? When you want service, you don't say, oh, hey, miss, you say, 过来, no, come here. Because that's how you demand, that's really, the culture of Chinese people is just completely different. I'm not saying that's like that in Taiwan or in Hong Kong, but in mainland China, that's just how you have to be. You have to be assertive, you have to be firm, and that's how people perceive you, right? So that's how I had to be. I had to change. I had to just not be nice. You know, I had to really grow a pair, and I don't even know how I did, but I did. You know, like anatomically, but I did. And yeah. Thank you for that question. Thank you for letting me air out some of my grievances.
Nerve there.
Yeah.
Gentleman here, and then we'll go there.
So with all this like surge of increase of new restaurants in Chinatown, including the one in Chatham Square, there's a lot of new places right there as well. Do you see that there's sort of an increasing of interest towards sort of the new Chinese cuisine like it is in the late 18th century with, late 19th century with the Bohemian movement? Yeah. Do you see that there's an increase of interest back again with the social medias and everything?
I just, with the social media thing, I think social media has made this industry like this, you know, not just social media, it's like with the cooking shows, Food Network, Iron Chef.
Food has become pop culture.
Yeah, it's been this thing, but like, no joke, this is not easy. Like this, the margins are slim, the long hours, labor laws, you know, all of that, rent, taxes, all of that stuff. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's for every 10 businesses, 7 will fail, something like that. So I think this whole movement is great. I actually like it a lot, but. You know, it's not that easy.
I just want
to add a little point. If you're thinking of open a restaurant, come to us because there is a small assistant unit at the Department of Small Business Services that are specifically set up to help you open because there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of permits. and also, as Wilson mentioned, the failure rate is very high. So we want to provide you with as much guidance and support and nurturing support so that to increase your probability of making it, because it's very high casualty rate, and so be very careful. The second thing I want to mention is obviously the issue with the woman. And we are launching a new program together with also Department of Small Businesses Services called We New York, which is basically helping women, we stand for women entrepreneurs. And we are committed to helping several hundred women between now and next June, giving you mentoring, giving you credit repair, giving you skills in negotiation, helping you with all sort of assistance, so that in case you're thinking a woman should start more businesses, all the latecomers that are coming in, whether it's Uniquely on Mart Street or the Taiwan Bear House, the pork chop house, these are all started by women. So I encourage you to experiment, but knowing the risk is there, so let us give you the additional support, the infrastructure that's there. So don't go out there on your own.
So I'd like to make a point. So this kind of relates to social media. So with social media and with all these Food Network shows, I feel like everybody thinks they're an expert on Chinese food, right? Besides this guy, he's an actual expert. But Chinese food is really diverse, and Chinese food isn't just Cantonese food. I mean, it's multicultural. We have all different types. Taiwanese food and different provinces of China has different types of cuisine, right? So there's a lot of traditional Chinese foods that nobody will really understand, okay? Because this is the reality, right? People who post on social media in English are mostly American born or Australian born or whatever born, right? That's not because they speak the language. But a lot of us, including myself, don't really understand traditional Chinese food, like herbs, making soup. And that's one of the reasons that drove me back to Powang Hong, is because we're a traditional supermarket, right? So, I mean, of course, I hate it when people come on to my Yelp and they're like, oh, they have cheap Pocky for $1.99. I'm like, okay, yes, I do, right? But that's not who we are. We sell quality herbs. For you, Francis, it's free. These are the things that we eat at home every day. We make our own food. I mean, probably we all, have grown up with families that cook at home. That's how we know what it's like to have, healthy foods. Right? We eat lots of vegetables and things like that, right? But for traditional Chinese food, we eat holistic. We eat based on the seasons. We eat based on how our physical condition is. If I'm feeling a little bit sick, then I will make soup for me to balance. It's all about yin yang, and it sounds very cliche, but it's true. It's yin yang. If we eat something really spicy, we'll eat a cooling element to counteract the balance of the heat, right? So these are things that I feel like people in my generation, or second, even my mom, not my mom, my husband's mother, right? She's she went to high school here, she doesn't really understand that. So it's really hard for people who's left the motherland, to really understand our true roots, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in Powang Hong, so I can teach other people like myself and others about how to eat traditionally, and it sounds, and it's really hard because I'm trying to run a business too, it's not, rent's not cheap in Chinatown, so.
You gotta move a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think Kian has something to say.
To talk about social media again, it's like, yes, it's true, there are a lot of Chinese food critics out there, and I think what allows them to do is actually to get curious about Chinese food. for a long time, very few people talk about regional cooking, and it's now regional cooking is the thing that everybody talk about that. However, just like what Sophia said, many of these people don't understand what all this different regional cooking is about, and also where the basic of the cooking technique came from, and so on. So what is interesting that when I started writing my blog, and I really started my culinary career by writing Chinese cooking blog, and my original intent in writing that is to quote-unquote educate the general American public. But what I found out later on, about 2 years later, most of the people that visited my site and those people who send me questions and commented questions, they are mostly second, third generation Asians, either in America or in England or in Australia. But these are all people, the younger generation of the Chinese diasporas. These are the people who, for one way or the other, when they were growing up, had rejected the Chinese culinary culture, and now rediscovering it. And they wanted to learn. They wanted to know how to actually reproduce the roots of their cuisine. And so I think it's really interesting to see the interest that people are expressing now with wanting to understand the traditional way of cooking. And I think that is the same point that Sophia is trying to make.
I want to add something to that too, and I think this might get a little bit at another angle of the question you were asking too. I think what you're asking is, okay, now with foodie culture, or with food as being this huge part of pop culture, there are people who are interested in, okay, well, it's not just Chinese food, right? And it's different regions of China, or blah, 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 blah. And the more interested you get, and the more curious you are, that's great, but it also becomes very performative, right? Like, I want to know more about Sichuan cooking than you do, so I can lord it over you next time you go to a Sichuan restaurant. And so there's that sort of element of engagement with the cuisine. But I think what Kian's talking about is also really interesting, because it's when you talk that how foodie culture sort of understands how restaurants work, right? Is that chefs are the heroes, and the restaurant or the menu is the chef's personal vision, and the chef is an artist, and so everything there is an independent, creative expression from that artist, right? But when you talk about a traditional cuisine, you are talking about that to some degree, but the more important part is the diner has to understand the canon. And you don't walk into a restaurant and be like, well, what do you have? No, you walk into a restaurant and you think, I know this cuisine, and what I want to eat today is this, this, and this, and maybe I know what season it is, so I know what ingredients you will probably have, and so these are the dishes I'm going to want, and these are the way those dishes work together. And you have to be so educated as a diner, as a consumer, in that culture, in that cuisine, to truly understand that cuisine, right? It's not about, do I read the menu and oh, is this cool, and oh, where'd you get that from, right? It's like, no, the menu is fundamentally the same. It's, are you a better cook of this dish than the person next to you? And it's such a different understanding of that. And in this case, as Kian talked about, I don't read Chinese, I speak Cantonese, but I feel so lost when I go to a Chinese restaurant. I order maybe the 12 dishes I remember most often from my childhood, but the thousands of dishes that I was that were served to me by my grandfather, and when he went to the restaurant that he loved, I'll never get those taste those things again, because I don't know how to order them. I literally don't know that they exist, and I don't know how to ask for them. And I think that's such a different way of engaging with a cuisine or a restaurant as a
right. And I also feel that one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand Chinese cooking is that there's a very different set of techniques. Many chefs here in America use the technique that they're familiar with, which is Western cooking technique, and try to adapt to the Chinese flavors, the Chinese ingredients. But there's a whole different set of Chinese cooking techniques that's really very unique. And I personally believe that if you're trying to reproduce the origin of this Chinese food, you need to understand the techniques. And this is why I in all my writings, I've always emphasized on the cooking technique itself. And from there, you can be creative, just like what they're doing in China. And in fact, in China, the interesting thing is that if you go back to China now, you really don't see a lot of the quote-unquote traditional original cooking anymore, because they've all been modernized. A lot of the original cooking has influenced each other, and there's a lot of fusioning of the regional cooking, and I think that's the interesting part, is that we try to identify quote-unquote authentic Chinese food, but we did not realizing that even in China, food is evolving. Food never stands still. They evolve. New chefs comes up and try to adapt with new things, and so it's something that we all do. But I truly believe, however, to respect the integrity of the cuisine itself, you reproduce the food with the traditional technique. That's how I see it.
Yeah. And the irony of that too is, right, a lot of times you'll find the most quote-unquote traditional or the most culturally conservative version of a culture in the diaspora, not in the place where it comes from.
Right.
Because those people are like, I live and breathe this stuff every day, I can evolve. But when you leave that place, and also you're like, oh my God, I can't let anything change, because if I let one thing change, it'll all go away. Right, and it's like my wife's family is Portuguese, and they came here in the 60s and 70s, and when they go back to Portugal, they're like, I don't understand what people are saying anymore, because the slang has changed so much, and the language has changed so much, and that's a dynamic that plays out over so many different... there's a dynamic that plays out over so many different communities. Yes, your question.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things I've been wondering is, I've been coming to Chinatown since I was a little girl and wandering around, and I'm remembering that it was a very small area back in the 60s. But now, as things have progressed, I'm watching the Canal Street area, the main part of Chinatown here in Manhattan, become very gentrified, and then with the onset of Danny Bowen and Mission Chinese becoming whatever you want to call it, new wave. And then I go to flood it, but I find the food quality of the regular Chinese going down. If I want true Chinese, or there's something that I think is authentic from my American point of view, I go out to Flushing and sometimes to Brooklyn. How do you feel about the gentrification of this area? Because this area was a low end, not a classy, where you want to live area. And now, if I want decent Chinese food in Manhattan, I'm back on this side of Chinatown. Because I'm down on East Broadway, I'm not over at Canal.
I would say that there are a couple of things to confront and to look at it. It is true that if you go to the elder boroughs today or the other boroughs today, you are given a lot more varieties of authentic cuisine. For example, one of the comment about, the Cantonese food is known for its natural taste. So it's not that spiciness or that sauce that overwhelms you. They want you to taste the food. And so to that end, they're sticking to that tradition. If you come into the core of Chinatown today, it is still very much the traditional cooking. The mission that you talk about that's on the periphery, that's along the so-called gentrification ring that's surrounding us, the core to me hasn't deteriorated that part. Am I concerned? Absolutely. Obviously, the UN report for 2014 about the global migration, in the 1950s, 30% of the world's population lived in urban centers. In a few decades, 70% will be living. So the competition for land, for resources, and the cost of living, and also the minimum wage, right? We were paying our workers X number of dollars, now it's 11. By the end of the year, pretty soon it will be 15. It started out $7.25 as the minimum wage in just a matter of a few short years. So it is that global migration pattern that we should be worried about. And I think that we need to deal with that head on, whether it's the climate change, that forcing us inland, because most of the shore will be underwater, including Miami and the good part of this island and Coney Island and Staten Island. And it's melting at a faster rate. And so that, to me, is the thing, because I also like to, I was talking to somebody about, the conflict between North Korea and South Korea. If North Korea knocked out just one city, Seoul, Korea, that city would wipe out 70% of the population of South Korea. And so if you look at Lunar New Year, the Chinese migration of all these millions of workers trying to rush home,
It gives you
a sense of, where we need to deal with. And with the melting, the Himalaya, the 1/3 of the world's source of water is melting away. And we're diverting all these pollutants that are bringing from the south, going to the north. It's destroying all the farmland. And so these are, even in this country, you now have water crisis. So when they talk about eating and drinking, it is a serious issue. It's not, we take for granted, there's still 300 million Indians without electricity. And if they want to get electricity, are you going to accept the power plants? And so these are all the issues that we have to confront as a society globally, where the water keep on rising and we have less land and where to get along.
So is the food better in Flushing or not?
Great question, Francis. I remember working as a waiter when the Sichuan food invasion came in, which is that traditionally you were used to what the Polynesian food, right? The Sushi Wong world, right? You have your egg foo young and all that, and then you have your traditional, very light and mild and bland Cantonese food, which is great. And all of a sudden you're injected with this spiciness, right? This hot kicking.
But what about the gentrification of the cuisine?
Right.
How's it affecting?
Well, I think, food is a very personal taste, as you can see. We took delegations to Beijing, and guess where they want to go? McDonald's. I can't live for 4 days without a burger. Come on, I can only eat so much Chinese food, and so it is, and so we encountered that. So it is, the food is a little bit about the region you grew up on. You know why some regions have spicy food? Because it's very humid, and you cannot perspire. The only way you can get moisture out of your system is has food, spicy food. So there's certain ingredients that are natural and germane to an area. So if you look at the Chinese channel, I highly recommend you watch the Chinese food show right now. There's still a great deal of authentic cooking, regional cooking that shocks you. It shocked me as a Chinese American.
So, Sophia,
Yeah.
Sophia, do you find, so you do a lot of business wholesale with Chinese restaurants. Do you find this phenomenon that she's talking about? Do you find that, some of the more traditional products are not staying in Chinatown and rather they're going into Flushing or going to Sunset Park?
Yeah. So the problem with Chinese restaurants, So the problem with Chinese restaurants, right, that every Chinese restaurant space is finding a good chef, right? And I think any restaurant, right, finding a good chef, head chef. A lot of really great chefs in China or in Asia, first of all, it's really hard for them to get immigration status to even come here, right? It's easier to go to Canada, so that's why you have a great foodie culture, Chinese foodie culture in like Vancouver, Toronto, right? You have great Chinese food. That's one of the reasons, right? So when you can get a great chef here, they want to, develop their own menus and stuff. Like they don't want to work at a restaurant, they're very ambitious, right? Great chefs. So they move to Flushing. They move to Brooklyn because they can find some investors and buy their own property or rent a property and build a great restaurant. So there are great restaurants in Flushing and in Brooklyn. I do a lot of deliveries out there to really great restaurants, to great chefs. So it is absolutely true that there's great cuisine there, but there's also excellent chefs in Chinatown as well. We go to Ping's, Zinke, even Jing Fong now, the old, the dim sum chef had retired. So he's the new chef. Yeah, I know, right? It's great. I just went there the other day. It
got really horrible.
It did for a bit, yeah, and then now it's completely renovated, by this really great designer. And once the hotel that opens up next door, you're gonna have even more people come in, so get your dim sum now, you know. But there is some great restaurants, you can ask me, I'll tell you where they are.
So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to our panelists. It's Pride Day time. Go out and support the local Chinatown business.
Don't forget to give a round of applause for the moderator, Francis Lam.